Every day at just after 9 o'clock here on Times Radio, we discuss the big stories of the morning. And this morning we'll do that with Gillian Keegan, former Conservative Education Secretary. Morning, Gillian.
Morning, Calum.
Hello. And Sonia Sodha, Times columnist and former Labour advisor. Morning, Sonia.
Good morning.
Morning, both. Well, here are some of the stories we've covered so far on the programme. The King is said to have made it clear to Prince Harry that the future of the monarchy will remain his priority. The Times reports there are no current plans to provide taxpayer-funded police protection to Harry's family, and Charles has insisted to Prince William that the work of the royals will not change. Simon Lewis served as Communications Secretary to the late Queen Elizabeth. He says Harry and Meghan have their work cut out to rebuild some bridges.
The really big issue is how long is it going to take to rebuild relationships that have been fractured, frankly, not just in the family, but in the press and more widely. And that's going to be the challenge, I think, for the Sussexes. How do they slowly rebuild relations that have been damaged? I think in any family, and it's just a fact, in any family, fractured relationships take time.
The French government says it stopped 185 small boats from crossing the English Channel in the 3 months since a £660 million deal was struck with the UK to patrol French beaches. John Vine, former Chief Inspector of Borders and Immigration, told us about the limits of the scheme and why people are raising questions about its value for money.
125 officers doesn't go very far on miles and miles and miles of coastline. And for any particular day, there'll be many of those officers who are day off. It is a small but effective force. What the Home Office is saying is, look, we're getting on top of this. And I think they're doing that in the face of some recent headlines which give people cause for concern.
Also, the UK's oldest pub is a source of constant debate. Many have claimed it. None have actually been able to produce the evidence to back it up sufficiently. A series of fanciful myths that have gone in over the centuries have all rendered attempts to crown a winner redundant. So much so that even the Guinness Book of Records has thrown the bar towel in. We asked Pete Brown, the beer columnist for The Times, why it mattered so much to pubs to claim the title.
Pubs are about continuity. They're about a link with previous generations. And we go to pubs when we want to kind of be a bit nostalgic, kind of think about the past. And so the oldest pub in Britain is just the kind of, it's the ultimate title. I'm trying to think of the Gen Z version of it, but I can't. But it's like the ultimate kind of thing. If you're the oldest pub, you must be the best pub.
So we'll be asking Gillian and Sonia whether Andy Burnham banking on voters' optimism rather than rage will pay off. And do you care if your pub has a backstory? And what about redundant phrases that are just a bit stupid?
We have had one from Mark. He said, I once saw a poster for a West End show which described it as eye-dazzling. I have thought hard about this, but I still can't come up with another body part that can be dazzled.
I love these. These are so good. WhatsApp us 0333 003 2353. Speaking of redundant phrases, no, I'm joking, that's unkind. Let's talk about Harry and Meghan, shall we? And their return to their return to the UK is mercifully just days away. They'll no doubt be trying to build bridges with their family. But I wonder, Gillian, if we should start with how they need to build bridges with the country. There's such a split of opinion on Harry and Meghan, and I wonder, do they need to work hard at that, or should we just view them as celebrities that some people like and some people don't?
I think they've got an opportunity to reset. I think we were all a little bit disappointed at how it all worked out with Harry and Meghan. Certainly, if you were from Sussex, you know the Duke and Duchess of Sussex didn't live up to what the expectations or hopes were. It's good news for the King. It's probably good news for journalism. Actually, there'll be a lot of column inches wasted probably on them, but it is an opportunity for them to reset. Whether they take it or not, I don't know. It's probably also a boost for our education system, because what they're basically saying is they're coming back for schools. But it's surprising news, particularly after the court case, after all of the bad blood that's been very recent. So it's not as if, it's all been quiet for 6 years since they left. It's continued this sort of a lot of legal challenges to the press, all of which he's lost. So hopefully they take it as a reset moment, but they've got a lot of work to do.
Yeah. And what do you think, Sonia? Should we expect them to make moves that will increase affection?
I'm sure that's what they would like to happen, and hopefully that is what will happen. But I suspect the way to do it might be different from what they've got planned. I mean, who knows? We will see. But I suppose my advice to them, if they're, coming back, and everyone, I think, would be very supportive of the idea of a family reunion. I think there's a lot of hurt, obviously. There's a lot that's been said in public. And, family politics, family bad blood can be difficult enough to deal with, let alone when you're washing your family's dirty laundry in public. So, it's difficult, but I would probably say, come over and keep a low profile, and don't sort of do loads and loads of stuff with the press, and try and make sure as much as you can that sources close to you aren't briefing the press. And then I think from that they could rebuild.
Yeah, rebuild is interesting as well, Gillian, because there's a part of this. What do we want them to do? Because I just feel like this idea of them being non-working royals is fine on paper, but they are part of the royal family, and so they will be doing royal family adjacent things. I'm almost certain of it. They'll be patrons of charities and organisations. They will go to events and opening ceremonies and be spotted, and they'll open your local community centre and all of these sorts of things. They are de facto working members of the royal family, are they not?
Well, they're not officially. However, there will be such press interest in everything they do, and obviously they are, the Invictus Games is a year off, so they are going to be wanting to promote a lot of their charitable work, etc. I think they've got to be so careful to get it right, because if they annoy everybody, then it's not going to go easy, and it's harder to hide. I mean, we're a small country. Yeah. In the US, they can kind of sort of hide away, and there's lots of big celebrities, but he is one of the most high-profile royals, and of course there were such high expectations when they got married, when they got together. I think there was super high expectations, and it's all turned out so badly wrong that I think I think the Brits will be fair and will give them another chance, but they're not going to be quiet and hidden away, because it'll be almost impossible for them to do that.
Very difficult. Sonia, on that point, I mean, Harry with the Invictus Games, that has been something of a real success, that I think there's probably some British pride in the fact that he started this and run it so successfully. The philanthropy side of things, I mean, Harry could be a real asset there and find his feet in a way that means public sentiment could start to turn, surely.
I absolutely agree. I mean, I think it's really interesting when you talk to people who kind of know Harry, who've worked with Harry in the charity sector. There's so much positivity about him, and he's done something, as you say, Rosie, genuinely brilliant with the Invictus Games. I think he's made some, I actually feel really sorry for Prince Harry, because I think he does come across as quite traumatised, actually, and we all know what's happened in his past. We all know the very public way that he lost his mother at a very young age. So he's been through a huge amount, and I think he's made some bad decisions, and some of that probably comes from his trauma, and some of it maybe comes from being ill-advised. And so I think he would have a lot to offer in terms of his charity work, as long as he keeps focused on that rather than sort of waging this battle with the royal family in public, which I don't think is good for him. I don't think it's good for the royal family. And personally, it's just something, as a consumer of journalism, I just don't want to see.
Yeah, I mean, the front page of the Daily Telegraph today is saying the Duke of Sussex hopes to regain the King's trust by no longer talking about private family matters in public. I mean, that probably, Gillian, is going to be essential to do that bit, because, first of all, so many intimate details of the royal family have been shared, whether it was the Oprah interview, whether it was in the book Spare. This is time for a new era, isn't it?
Yeah, and the never explain, never complain sort of
mantra was thrown out the window somewhat.
I mean, he didn't get that memo for sure, and he's certainly done a lot of complaining. And also, of course, there's the relationship with his brother William and Kate. I mean, I think that the whole country would love to see all those relationships improved and healed. I'm a huge supporter of our royal family. I think they're incredibly positive for our country. So he has the opportunity to be positive and to reset. But it will really depend on how he manages, both with the press, but also to rebuild those relationships. And of course, the one everybody's going to be watching is William and Kate, because if it's to be believed, they haven't spoken for quite a few years now.
Yes, and there is something to be said for the kind of poetry of that potential reuniting narrative, I suppose, that might be a bit of a boost in all of that.
Now, the chief political commentator for The Times, Patrick Maguire, has written today in the paper that Andy Burnham is banking on the public believing in his message of hope rather than catering to the rage many feel over issues we've been discussing all morning, migration. Many insisting, and we've heard this a lot from Reform, haven't we, saying Britain is broken. But could glossing over such issues in favour of, having this UK tour offering cost of living savings actually bring about a sort of polarised US style of politics that Andy Burnham is keen to avoid? Gillian, I think worth starting with you. The message that came up and the word that came up so many times from Andy Burnham was hope. A month in, do you think he's managed to convey that persuasively?
Well, I mean, he's certainly trying. I mean, it's a hopey, changey thing, isn't it? We had change last time, and now it's hope. But the problem he has is the numbers aren't listening and the numbers don't lie. So there's two things that have happened. The first is the borrowing costs are now at a 20-year high, which means the government's headroom is pretty much non-existent. And they have got a budget in October. So everybody's hoping that the budget is not going to be a disaster like the last two in terms of consumer confidence, business confidence, etc. And if you look at, consumer confidence, it's down. Spending is actually down over the summer. Now, that could be because of the hot weather. It could be several other reasons. But the problem he has is this hopey, changey thing. The numbers don't lie. And that is literally where his date with destiny and John Healey's date with destiny is going to come. And unless he can get some of that hope back into the economy in terms of investment, in terms of business investment, in terms of consumer confidence, then it's all just going to be words.
Yeah, there is a risk of it being a bit surface level, isn't it? I mean, Sonia, what he said, this quote in Patrick's piece here, is what they're saying is we need positivity. Can you keep it going? Can you keep doing what you're doing? Do you think that the Prime Minister... Do you think that's a clever way to drive your politics for the time we're in?
Look, I think that Andy Burnham, he does come across as more positive. Can you hear me?
We can. We can also hear an awful lot of sirens, which I don't
okay?
quite know where that's coming from.
I live on quite a busy road and I've got my window open because it's still quite hot in my flat. So
as long as you're okay. We were worried they were coming for you, Sonia.
They're not coming for me. Don't worry. They're not coming for me. Can you hear me right now?
Yeah, we could hear you the whole time.
Okay,
We were just accompanied by the emergency sirens.
Okay, I'm really sorry about the background
That's
noise.
fine.
So I think he is a much more positive and optimistic communicator than Keir Starmer. That comes much more naturally to him. And, Patrick sort of got vignettes about how he's seen by his mentor, David Blunkett, in terms of how the way his ability to connect with voters, Blunkett described him as sort of Clinton-esque in that approach, which I think is interesting. But Gillian's also right, which is that comms only takes you so far. So I think it's really good to have somebody at number 10 who's a natural communicator and who can strike a tone of optimism. But ultimately, I actually disagree. I don't think we're as polarised as the US, and I think polling data shows that on social issues. I think the issue we've got over here is that there are a number of voters who are incredibly frustrated and disenfranchised from mainstream politics and don't believe that it can deliver for them. And I think that's why we've got, quite large numbers of people now supporting sort of anti-establishment parties on the right and left, like Reform UK and the Greens. And, that comes through in the polling. People don't feel optimistic about politics. They don't feel that politics can deliver for them. Now, that's not polarisation necessarily, but I do think that is quite a dangerous sentiment because it can turn into sort of anti-systemism, as it were. And I think the difficulty is that any government right now would have a really big job to deliver because the fact of the matter is that we've had a stagnant economy for the last, since 2008, since the financial crisis. We haven't found another really powerful engine of growth like the city pre-2008. And for 40 years, levels of business investment have been too low in the UK. So there are long-term structural issues in our economy. That is not a party political point. And boosting growth back to where it was in the 2000s under Gordon Brown, pre-2008, is not an easy endeavour, and doing something about regional inequalities is not an easy endeavour. So I love the fact that he's striking a positive tone, but whether or not he can deliver in a way that makes people feel like politics has got the answers, mainstream politics has got the answers, I'm sure he would say as well, the jury is still out on that.
Yeah. Gillian, it's that idea of contentment, isn't it? And getting back to that.
Yes, and I don't think we are content. I think we're actually quite worried. I mean, I agree with Sonia. We're not nearly as polarised as the States. And actually, if you ever want to feel good, go to the States, watch their TV, come back home, and you'll feel better, because our standards of journalism and debate are much, much, much better and higher. There is. I myself am quite optimistic. There's a new technology, which is AI, which is going to revolutionise a lot of what we do. There is an opportunity to be hugely much more productive than we are as a country, and that's public sector as well as private sector. So there is some hope if we can grasp it right. And we still have wonderful people. The country has a lot going for it, and having worked abroad most of my career, I've always felt that optimism about our country, mostly comparing them to most other places. But I do think it's not just because Andy Burnham says it, or indeed anybody in government. The one thing, I mean, obviously I'm Conservative, the one thing I think is that governments are not the best people at spending money or investing. In fact, when they do, they normally, spend 5 times as much to get nowhere. So we've really got some serious issues, and they're there for a long time, trying to build a road, trying to build a reservoir, trying to even build a house. Everything is really got to be much, much quicker, much more productive. So if we can do these things and do them better, then there is an opportunity. But lots of people have said that, and the same things keep happening again and again. And unfortunately, I don't think governments are very good, and certainly not a government that does have very little and limited business experience as part of it. So I think they should get out the way and let the private sector do things and deliver things. That would be my recommendation.
On this supposed dividing line, hope v despair or hope v anger, Sonia, hope, it's sort of with anticipation things are going to improve. Andy Burnham has had, if we look at the polls, we've talked at length about the sort of Burnham bounce. How long is hope useful for before people start to say, you need to deliver?
Yeah, well, I think you do have to deliver. What I think is that at the next election, so, that's sort of what probably going to be around, well, some people are saying it's going to be a lot earlier. Personally, I still think it will be kind of 2.5 years away. But I think what people will need a sense of is that even if everything isn't all, rainbows and unicorns at that point, that the government has started to deliver in a way that is tangible. And I do think that some of the stuff that Andy Burnham did in the first couple of weeks around the cost of living, now, none of it's going to make an absolutely huge difference to people's budgets, because it just can't, because, the price of oil makes a far bigger difference, which is set by what's going on globally. It makes a far bigger difference than things that government can do around the edges, like bus fares. But I think it's sensible in that it shows to people, look, there's some stuff we can do, and we're going to do it because we realise how difficult things are. So, but obviously just hope isn't enough. There has to be some sense that delivery is working by the next election, I think.
And actually, some of the targets he's laid down, we talked this week about the promise to say we're going to give a route out of rough sleeping to every single person who is by Christmas. That will be a target we can measure in 4 months' time, whether they've managed that or not. So I think, some of this hopeful message does come with short timelines, and we'll see if they stand up.
Shall we go on to something that has proved to be the the irritant of the morning, perhaps, but it's been very entertaining.
I think shared pleasure in sharing your irritants.
Yeah, fair. So we've been talking about a subject that the Times explores today: why so many pubs claim to be the oldest in Britain, but none can prove that they actually are. It got us and you thinking about other things that you see on signs and blackboards, or maybe said out loud. Good food served here. world-famous fish and chips, freshly cut sandwiches, these things that are all a bit redundant and unnecessary. Keith suggests returning back to something. You don't return back to unless you're doing a lot of turning around. What about this? When people say shoulder to shoulder or laser focused, revert back comes up quite a lot as well. So redundant. First, should we start with pubs actually, Gillian? Do you care about the age of your pub? Does it need to have a story, or does it just need to have a good pint?
Oh no, I love the old pubs. I mean, the ones I used to live near to the Prospect of Whitby in East London, and I don't know whether it was. I think it was the oldest one along the river for a particular time. If they differentiate and tighten the criteria, then you can always come up with something. But if you go to some of our pubs, I mean, they're literally older than most people's countries, so that is something to be proud of. And and what we need is for them to all keep going. And there's a big drive. I know a lot of my colleagues, so have a pint a week in your pub. The most important thing is to go to them, and I still think pubs are hugely differentiating for our country, and people just love them. And no one else has them. They don't have anything like it. So no, I think they are a part of our British culture. And if you ask people, it's what they would identify, as uniquely British, and that, or Irish, to be fair as well. There's always an Irish pub somewhere. Yeah. But they are different, and the old ones are fantastic. I mean, the Guineas one that comes up, we went there for my mother's 80th. That was, a real joy, because you just imagine all these people who've been there for century after century, and the fact you can still buy a pint in a tankard that probably has been going for more than 100 years is, I think it's something great. Yeah, something good about that.
It's definitely charming, Sonia, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I do think that we love the idea of drinking somewhere, or eating somewhere, or visiting somewhere that is the town's oldest X or the country's oldest Y. We love to sort of feel that sense of history. That doesn't mean to say, I mean, I live by the river, and there are some really nice old pubs here. There's also a brand new pub with lovely kind of waterfront seating that's also really nice. So, but I think we love that kind of myth of, we're having a pint where someone had a pint, 1,000 years ago. So, tall tales about it. Are they doing anyone any harm? I think it's probably best to be historically accurate, but, they're probably not doing any wider harm, are they?
And the Guinness World Records have just given up trying to find the world's oldest pub because it's too difficult, basically, to check. The reason this redundant phrases topic started is because the thing I cannot stand at a pub is when they have a sign saying good food sold here, or good food here, because you think there was no point in putting the good in there. And it has really triggered this whole response. Mark has just said hand-battered fish is annoying. It's like when you go to the pub and they say some things, Calum made this point earlier, homemade. Yeah. But only some things say homemade.
Yeah, avoid the rest of them because they're all frozen rubbish. Anne says, a phrase I hate is what I would say is, apparently, says Anne.
Jacqueline says, let us pray together.
Yeah,
which, yes.
Because it's a collective,
it's already collective experience. Gillian, are there phrases that just really frustrate you?
Well, you've got the politicians one, to be honest, and you think, yeah, you should be honest.
Yeah. Let me be clear, Gillian.
We always hear, let me be clear now. Gillian, were you guilty of a to be honest, when you were giving interviews?
Yeah, definitely, because it's a colloquialism from Liverpool, so we say it all the time. I don't know whether that's just, us, we've got chips on our shoulders about what people say about Scousers. But yeah, to be honest, is something we always say. No. But it should be unnecessary in everybody, but definitely in a politician.
When you're being briefed, Gillian, for an interview, are you given stalling tactics or things to say to divert and deflect?
I guess they might have tried. What they used to do, obviously, was the lines to take. And I used to say, well, what happens when we get another question? You can't. And they said, just say it again. And I said, no, that's what Ed Miliband did. It didn't work at all for him. So you've got to answer the question is actually something that a lot of people would shout at the telly when the politicians are on. So I always tried to answer the question, but I did get myself into trouble sometimes.
Sonia, didn't you used to work with Ed Miliband?
I did, yeah, but I was actually going to chip in with something different, which is that, you know, when I sort of first started working out in think tanks and charities, I mean, you do often, before you do your first bit of media, you'll get some media training. And I remember we were taught about a technique called block and bridge, which is basically when you don't want to answer a question, you sort of say, that's an interesting question. And another thing is blah, blah, blah. I think Gillian's absolutely right. People get very angry when politicians do it, though.
And normally what happens is, as soon as that happens, me and Calum make eye contact.
Yes.
We think, oh,
and roll your eyes at each other.
Yeah, exactly. What else we got? Dion says, I'm living my best life is a redundant phrase. How can you possibly know what choices you have or haven't made would give you a better life or worse life situation? I've actually written one down here, which I don't know if it's a redundant phrase, but it's maybe misused, I think. To draw a line in the sand, which people use as a way to say this is definitely the end of the issue, but lines in the sand get washed away by the sea, and so I'm not sure it's as definitive as it's used to mean, if you see what I mean.
Yes, if you take the sort of literal translation, maybe not,
Yes.
but definitely when it's said, you understand the sentiment. Chris has said annoying signs, secret garden. It's not a secret if you're advertising it. Yes, fair enough.
I love all of these, honestly. Crystal clear, says Susie. Ugh, is what she says on that. There's loads of these. These are very fun. Thank you very much indeed.
And thank you very much to Sonia and Gillian. It's been a pleasure as always. Gillian Keegan, the former Conservative Education Secretary, and Sonia Sodha, Times columnist and former Labour advisor. Thank you both.
Thanks,
Thank you.
both.
Bye-bye.
Lovely to chat. See you soon.